Welcome, everybody. Welcome, fellow patriots. Welcome, fellow deplorables. Welcome once again to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show. I'm Sharon Engel, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos Radio Network with a shout out to the listeners in Jacksonville, Tampa, and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Nevada, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Boulder and Colorado Springs, Colorado, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Long Beach, California. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. And joining me today is my co-host, George Landreth. George, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. This is the place to be. Conservative Commandos.
I agree. And we're going to have some great guests today. But first, I want to know what's on your mind. I know I've got a couple of things on my mind, too. It seems like we always have a little bit of fun with this first half hour. So you started off.
Well, I have to say I'm enjoying watching the food fight in the Democratic Party over Joe Biden and his creepiness. You know, I don't mean to come to his defense. I'm just pointing, I think, the obvious, which is that while he's creepy and kind of weird, the stuff we've seen on camera does not quite rise to the level of the sort of stuff that they often associate with Me Too. It's not who is the movie guy?
Weinstein.
There we go. Weinstein? It's not the stuff that Harvey Weinstein was accused of doing, right?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, there's something delicious about watching all this, and it reminds me on so many different levels that if it weren't for double standards, there'd be no standards at all on the left, because even though Biden's, transgressions are minor in comparison to Weinstein's, and he's mostly just creepy, not really malignant necessarily. We have him on tape doing so much more than Kavanaugh ever did. They accused Kavanaugh of all kinds of, that one person was accusing him of insanely, crazy criminal stuff, but it was self-evidently foolish. Mr. Avenatti was her attorney, which I think tells everyone all they need to know. Well, Avenatti is an Italian name, and it means in Italian creepy porn lawyer. I'm just kidding.
Good. I don't know Italian, so you
it should. I actually do speak Italian, so but I'm joking. It's not actually that, but it should. It should now be changed so that if you want to say creepy porn lawyer in Italian, you just go Avenatti. And that becomes it.
I think you're right about this. Poor Joe, I think he just got caught up in a political twist. That's interesting because I don't think there's anything to this. I don't think they think that Creepy Joe is, as you say, malignant, or that he was really out to do anybody any harm. He didn't mean that. I don't think so. I mean, there's pictures of his wife. She's just as affectionate as he is. So they just that's kind of their family culture, if you will. But some people are just more affectionate than others. But I think it has to do with this move to the left. We've watched Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez push to the left, and Ilhan Omar push to the left. And even now we're seeing results of local elections pushing to the left. Chicago went Democrat socialist, and they're proud of it. They don't even hide that label. Their mayor is a Democrat socialist. So we're watching them kind of go the way of Detroit, and
and Venezuela.
Yes, and Venezuela. And so when you talk about this, I think it's just a political way to get rid of Joe. They want to clear the field for the socialists. We've got
right. He's an old school liberal, but he's not a democratic socialist.
That's right.
That's not to say he doesn't have some socialist policies he supported, but he is comparatively moderate to someone like AOC.
Well, and some of their candidates, absolutely, Beto O'Rourke is embracing those socialist principles, and of course Bernie Sanders, he ran as a socialist last time. So, well,
Yeah.
they have their candidates in place, and they would just like to push these others out. Bernie Sanders has actually raised $28 million, which is more than anyone else in the field, and yet, of all of the comers in that political arena, you would think Bernie would have had his fill, because the fix is in. On their side, the fix is in. And I think we're watching that fix right now with Joe Biden. The fix is in.
Yeah.
They're going to choose a socialist of some kind, and
Yeah.
it's not Joe.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. It seems to me that they'll use anything they can to keep him out. And then some of the stuff about him is kind of troubling, because I think there's this thing where he used his power as the vice president to put pressure on the Ukrainian government to stop investigating some company that was doing business in the Ukraine, which his son was involved with. That sounds pretty shady. And Joe, throughout his career, has had problems with kind of integrity. I mean, he used to tell Neil Kinnock his life story as if it were his own. When he was running for president the first time back in 1863. I'm just kidding. I'm 18, but he's kind of had the and I think he had a problem with plagiarism even in earlier than that. I mean, so Joe seems like an amicable, kind of friendly guy, but I don't know that honesty and integrity has always been Joe's strong suit. And what's interesting is the Me Too stuff is getting more press, even though to me it's relatively moderate here, because it's, I'm not saying I endorse everything he does, because he seems a little handsy, a little weird and stuff. But bottom line, the corruption, though, is pretty serious stuff. And so it reminds me of a story down in Virginia with the governor. The whole yearbook thing, that's a big deal. But what we don't talk about at all is what he said the day before, which triggered it all, which is that doing fourth trimester abortions, meaning after the baby is already born, killing it, is okay. We're not even talking about that anymore. And of course, I guess now we're not even talking about the other stuff either, because the press is complicit. But, so it's just kind of weird how in politics we talk about things often, the press does, that don't matter as much. They'll pick the second most important thing or the third most important thing. And the really big thing that tells you what's going on in their heart and their mind, totally ignore. Doesn't matter.
Well, I think you're right, and that is the problem with the Democrats. They really, I think that it's insulting to our intelligence, the way that the media plays us. And this Me Too movement is a play on women. That's what they're going for, is that woman's vote, and they're siding with the women. Of course, you're all victims. Of course, you've gotten, the short end on all of the things that you could have had, should have had, would have had it not been for white men and them using you. And so that's not the truth, though. The truth is not revealed there. And now it's kind of interesting to see them turn that on their own and just go after one of their own with this you're anti-woman, which is really what they're saying about Joe. You're just a user, you're anti-woman. No self-respecting woman would vote for Joe Biden because of the way he uses women.
Well, I would argue nobody who has any brain would vote for Joe Biden or any of his friends in the Democratic Party, because they're going to do to they're going to do to America what their political friends and allies did to Venezuela. But
Well, with that, George, we're up against a little break here. We're going to take one, and then we'll come back and we'll introduce our guests, and we'll talk some more about some of these things that are going on right now here in the good old USA. And we're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM/FM 24/7. Of course, now you can watch us on the AUN TV network in Northern California. We'll be right back, George and I, after this break.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth. She is Karen. I'll do that again. I don't know why I said Karen. I know your name's Sharon. I've known you for like a decade now. Okay, sorry. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. It's good to have you with us. I'm George Landreth, and she is Sharon Engel. The one and only Sharon Engel, actually. This is the place the newsmakers go to be heard, and this is the place to be, the Conservative Commandos. You can, if you want to hear a rebroadcast of our show, if you want to watch a rebroadcast of our show, because now you no longer have to just, you may want to see, you probably don't want to see my face, but you may want to see Sharon's face. And if you want to do that, then you can do that by checking out our websites, ccrsnetwork.com, ccrsshow.com. There you get all the information about Conservative Commandos. You can watch or listen to past, I was going to say issues, but they would be past installments of the program. So we do have some great guests coming up. I'm kind of excited about some of our guests. So I don't know if you've got the list there in front of you, but we ought to talk about them.
Well, I do have the list, and we do have some exciting guests, George. I'm excited, too, to interview, first off, Dr. Michael Brown, who is the host of a nationally syndicated Line of Fire radio program. His latest book is Donald Trump is Not My Savior. An evangelical leader speaks his mind about the man he supports for president. And today we've asked him to come on and talk about an article that he posted, So Much Evil, Mommy. Those poor babies. He's going to be talking to us about the latest new movie release, Unplanned. And I think that everyone should see it. It's got an R rating, but we're going to discuss that, why that R rating is in place. And I think people
I
will
went to see it. It's a very good movie. I mean, and I don't typically see R-rated movies. And I would take my kids to see this movie, and I never allowed my kids to see R-rated movies. That was a strict rule at our house.
Well, I think one of the reasons it's rated R is to keep those young ladies that probably would benefit the most from seeing it, from being in the theaters. Our second guest is Brian McNichol. He is a lead writer for the Accuracy in Media website. He has worked with the Heritage Foundation, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, the Galen Institute, and a variety of other policy organizations in Washington, and he has served as Director of Communications for the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. He's also written an article, Ex-CIA Chief Poster Child for Pundits Who Got It Wrong on Trump Collusion. So we're going to cover this again once more from a different angle, this time from a guy that should have known better. But and since he lied,
not only should have known better, I'm sure it did know better. It was just lying to us.
It's just amazing to me that we haven't been able to do anything about what I feel are liars, people that probably should have been taken to task and maybe ultimately will be under the law for this. Our last guest is Alfredo Ortiz, who is the president and CEO of Job Creators Network, where he has led the defense of small businesses from the onslaught of bad government policies. Alfredo has testified before legislative committees about the impact of taxation and regulation on small business growth and speaks frequently to business organizations across the nation about the needs of job creators to seize responsibility for defending free enterprise. And we've asked him to come on and talk about his article, Understanding the Cuts This Taxation Season. So, I don't know how you are, but April 15th is coming upon us, George, and it'll be nice to talk with Alfredo about what's going to happen with the taxes this year now that we have these new rules in place. I was thinking of new rules as I looked out there and scanned the internet today looking for articles that are of interest. And of course, we have the largest recreational use of public lands in the nation here in 100 miles from Reno. In fact, we see these guys come in every August. They just come in their RVs. They come in and rent RVs. They go out to the desert And then they come in 2 weeks later, they're covered with alkali from being out on the desert. And they try to clean up. Their RVs are trashed. Their vehicles are white with this alkali. Everybody looks like they've really been through something traumatic, and yet it was all in the name of fun. And they call this festival Burning Man. The organizers now want to build a city that's bigger. Right now, they're at capacity, 80,000 people invading the desert land of Nevada. And everybody goes, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is they've got to go through towns to get there. The big deal is there's a town that's right near there, and they actually impact that little town every time they come in. But now it seems that the Bureau of Land Management, who is in charge of writing environmental and impact statements for the use on these public lands, has said they didn't say they actually read this book, but it's interesting that there is a book that was published in 2017 called Use of Force by Brad Thor, which is a spy thriller, totally fiction, yet he uses Burning Man as the target for terrorism. And so now the government's kind of alerted, and they're saying, wait, this could be a soft target. And after what happened in Las Vegas in 2017, they really don't want to take any chances. So now here they come with the regulation, and there's the pushback from the organizers saying, wait a second, this is a festival about freedom, and now you're going to make us put up fences and barriers and block what we can take in and bring out of that festival. So we're brewing again for another government versus states' rights here, I guess, a constitutional conflict, if you will.
It sounds interesting. I've heard, of course, of Burning Man, but never attended. And I try to have my views on freedom not be, affected by my support for what they're up to. It's like free speech. I support free speech, even if your speech is stupid and irrational and makes no sense. But I suspect that the other part of this, of course, is there are local citizens who may feel adversely impacted because my experience is if people get crazy drunk, they often do crazy things.
They do, and the little town of Gerlach has been impacted for years by it, and the citizens are conflicted. They don't know whether to stay and protect their property and maybe be overrun by the celebrators, or just leave town for the 2 weeks, come back and clean up their property and hope that it's not in too much disrepair from being vandalized or just different things by the celebrators. So it's just a real catch-22 for them. But I think the larger picture here is not only national security, but local security and security of those people that come in. It would be terrible to have 100,000 people at the mercy of some lunatic like they were there at that concert in Las Vegas.
Right. The concert goers were basically, like you said, they were at his mercy. Not that he had any mercy to offer, but
no, he didn't. He didn't, sadly. So it will be interesting to watch this thing develop over the next few months. Burning Man comes in the heat of the year in August, which is another thing.
I can think of better places to go in August.
and when they say Burning Man, they mean they're going to burn a statue, but actually brings up visions of real men burning from the sun, because you're out there in the heat on the desert, basically getting fried. Your poor skin is sunburned and just totally invaded by alkali. So, I can't think that it's much fun for just from a purely physical, but, whatever. To each his own. That's right. We'll be right back after this short break with our first guest, Dr. Michael Brown, talking about the movie Unplanned. And we're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM/FM 24/7. Of course, we can be seen on the AUN TV network in Northern California as well. So stay tuned. George and I will be right back. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Sharon Hangel here with our co-host, George Landreth, and we're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos radio studios with a shout out to our listeners in Jacksonville, Tampa, and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Nevada, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Boulder and Colorado Springs, Colorado, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Long Beach, California. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. And I'd like to introduce our first guest today. This is Dr. Michael Brown, who is the host of a nationally syndicated Line of Fire radio program. His latest book is Donald Trump is Not My Savior. An evangelical leader speaks his mind about the man he supports as president. Dr. Brown, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure always. You posted, "So much evil, mommy, those poor babies." What is that about? Talk to us a little bit, Dr. Michael Brown.
Yeah, I have really been encouraging folks to go and see the movie Unplanned, a movie that many have said could be like the Uncle Tom's Cabin for the pro-life movement, just as that turned the hearts of Americans against slavery. And on behalf of the slaves, may this movie turn hearts on behalf of the unborn. And I had seen Unplanned before it came out. I got a private release and watched it home and was deeply moved, sobbing uncontrollably at one point, so moved by the content. So actively promoted, actively encouraging folks to see it. And then on my social media, on Ask Dr. Brown, on Facebook and elsewhere, I said to folks, if you went and saw the movie, this was last weekend when it opened, and it opened way bigger than anyone was expecting at the box office, with a great response from the viewers. So I said, if you went to see the movie, tell us about your experience. Tell us about what happened. How were you impacted? So we began to hear from dozens and dozens of people who were there, who were posting their experiences, and one after another deeply moved and incredible stories, and parents with teenagers and the teens' hearts being changed. And then this one, a mother said, I went with my 11-year-old daughter. You see, it's rated R. The rating R is because Hollywood does not like the pro-life movement. That's why it's rated R.
True.
So if your kids understand what abortion is, if they're old enough to understand and discuss it, they're old enough to see the movie. So she was there with her 11-year-old daughter. At the end of the movie, when they leave, the daughter begins sobbing uncontrollably, holding on to her mother, saying, those poor babies, so much evil, mommy, those 4 babies, then everyone needs to see this movie. And then the mother tells her story that she was going to abort that very girl at the age of 12 weeks. And she was there in the abortion clinic when she decided against doing it. So that child wouldn't even exist. That child would have been yet another casualty to abortion. So I wrote the article sharing the experiences of different people, others emphasizing the message of love and grace and forgiveness that came through it. But I wanted people to see how impacting it was, especially on a child.
So much evil out of the mouths of babes, really, isn't it, Dr. Michael Brown? We have become so calloused in our culture toward the killing of babies that we don't even talk about infanticide or murder when it comes to the abortion industry, but that's exactly what's going on. And this little child was able to see it so clearly.
Yeah, and one other thing that comes out loud and clear through the movie is Planned Parenthood is big business. Planned Parenthood is a money-making industry, and they make the bulk of their money, their greatest profits they make from abortion. And here's what's interesting. Planned Parenthood is big. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of connections with a lot of powerful people. If this movie was not accurate, if this movie lied them, them, misrepresented them, spoke falsehoods about them, misportrayed them, you better believe that the producers and everybody having anything to do with this movie would absolutely be slammed with lawsuits and things like that. But they're not forthcoming. Why? Because the movie tells the truth. It is evil. It is ugly. And by the way, if you walk in front of an abortion clinic and there are pro-life workers there, and maybe they're holding up a sign of an aborted baby, that's as gruesome or even more gruesome than anything you're going to see in the movie. It's just the simple reality of what happens with an abortion. And if you know the story of Abby Johnson, and I had her on my show earlier this week to talk about the amazing exposure God's given to her ministry. This is a true story. She was the youngest Planned Parenthood clinic director in America. She had won Employee of the Year award, and she had been a professing Christian. And you see in the movie that many of the women involved in Planned Parenthood, involved in the clinics, they actually think they're doing good. They actually think this is a helpful thing. We're helping women. We're helping young mothers. We're helping older mothers. This is a good thing that we're doing. So she begins to have some questions, and then she's asked, after all her years working there, to go in the back and to help out with an abortion and to just hold the ultrasound. So the wand for the ultrasound, to hold that so that the doctor can see how he's aborting the baby. Just that scene. It's not gruesome in terms of what you see, but the shock of it, the reality of what happens in an abortion is so overwhelming that people are devastated, people are speechless. But this has happened by the millions. Abby Johnson realized that in her years as a Planned Parenthood worker and director, she had participated one way or another in 22,000 abortions. But consciousness is rising. More and more young people are pro-life. They're realizing, hey, that they see the ultrasound. That's a baby there. I could have had a brother. I could have had a sister. I didn't have to be an only child. Eyes are opening. Even recent polls indicate that hearts are turning. The number of abortion clinics in America is about 1/3 of what it was at the height of the pro-abortion movement. So we can turn the tide, and the Unplanned movie can really be a key to open hearts and minds.
Well, it's amazing to me because you had to establish its credibility as a movie by telling us if it wasn't true, they would have sued. But it is the true story of Abby Johnson, isn't it? It's not a made-up story. It's not something that Hollywood has said, well, this needs to be produced, so we'll make up a story. How much is Hollywood? How much of it did they make up, or did Abby Johnson discuss that with you?
No, it's her story. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have someone that's a perfect look-alike or every detail exactly the same, but it's her story. In fact, Ashley Bratcher, who took the lead role and was warned, you're going to destroy your career and you're never going to get another invitation to act after this. That's the level of opposition and intimidation and numerous other things trying to stop the movie from even happening. let alone get the exposure it's gotten. But she read Abby Johnson's story. She read her book. She imbibed what Abby Johnson's life was like. She spoke with her frequently during the shooting. In fact, that key moment with the ultrasound where the light goes on and she realizes exactly what happens in an abortion and realizes I can't participate in this anymore. She constantly thought about what Abby Johnson said. She constantly thought about what she had written so that she could take that in. In fact, when I asked Abby how it felt to see herself being portrayed in this way, I know that here and there I've done something on a Christian TV network and they want to reenact part of my testimony where I got saved or something, or just have an act, some actor doing something. You look at it, it's like, that's not real. That's not me. Here's an actual movie, a Hollywood movie, a well done movie. When I say Hollywood, well produced and all of that. And Abby said the hard part for her, she said, think of the most embarrassing, sinful things you've ever done in your life, and now everyone is going to watch them on the big screen. So that's how real the story is, and it gives a real picture of Planned Parenthood. It's not exaggerated. And Abby's whole ministry is a pro-life ministry, but they have helped many, many, many people leave the abortion industry, and they have seen abortion clinics close. They've even worked now with 7 abortion doctors that got right with God and left, and now they're part of Abby Johnson's larger ministry network.
Well, we have to take a short break. I know George is on the other side. He wants to talk to you about this. He's seen the movie. And I want you to, on the other side, explain why they call this movie Unplanned. We are talking with our guest, Michael Brown, Dr. Michael Brown, about the latest showing, the upcoming movie, the one that's out in theaters near you right now, Unplanned. And we're also coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM/FM 24/7. And now you can see us on our TV show on the AUN TV network in Northern California. George and I will be right back with Dr. Michael Brown.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth with Sharon Engel. We're your Conservative Commandos host today, and we are glad you stuck around. We've got a great interview with Dr. Michael Brown. We're partway through it, but we've got lots more to discuss. Just to remind you, if you want to check out our websites, hear a rebroadcast of our show, or watch a rebroadcast of the television show, check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, ccrshow.com. It's all there. We truly are everywhere, so you can catch us in, I guess, everywhere but maybe China, North Korea, and Iran, where I'm sure they find a way to edit us out because the truth hits them too hard. But for the rest of the world, we're there. Well, we've been talking with Dr. Michael Brown, and he is the host of a nationally syndicated program. It's a radio program called Line of Fire. And he has a book out, which is Donald Trump is Not My Savior. An evangelical leader speaks his mind about the man he supports as president. And so with that, thank you, Dr. Brown, for sticking around and for spending some time with us on the Conservative Commandos. I wanted to pick up this interview with the movie, kind of its impactful nature. I think sometimes movies that are poignant are more difficult to pull off. I would argue it's much easier to pull off a superhero movie. The acting doesn't have to be quite as good. There's not the risk that it'll come across as corny or that you won't quite, make the connection on something that's kind of deep and poignant. And so I thought this was what I would call a high difficulty, high risk movie. At least that was my take. And so I was prepared to kind of be glad they did the movie, but also prepared to acknowledge that they hadn't come, that they weren't going to get a 10 on they didn't stick the landing, so to speak. But both my wife and I felt that it was powerful and that it was really well executed. So it's not just an important true story. It's a well-told story. And so to me, I don't know if you saw it that way or if you agree with my assessment, but I thought they stuck the landing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For those who want a mile a minute of constant, like the superhero action in the sky falling. No, it's not meant to be a movie like that. But I was just thinking about the idea of the way it unfolds, where you see Abby Johnson, she's there, she's running the clinic and all this, and it's pretty early in the movie that the pivotal moment happens. That's what caught me so off guard, and I was so devastated by that scene. I thought, well, that's going to be later in the movie. So it's one of those things where it takes you to the key point, and now let's go back and get you to this point. So even the way it was executed, I thought that was a brilliant strategy to do it like that. I thought the people played their roles well, and the Christian workers were there. They were just kind of regular people that loved the Lord and were praying. They weren't these superstars. You had others that were there that were a bit obnoxious and preaching a condemning message, and you didn't have sympathy towards them. The Planned Parenthood workers, as I said, they genuinely thought they were helping women and doing the right thing, and you didn't really see the evil of it, the business side, until you saw more of the senior leadership and what was motivating them. So it portrayed characters realistically. And here, I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. And if you're in the Lord, you're in the Lord, and that's it. And the fact that Abby Johnson was professing to be a Christian and saying it's fine to do what she does and justifying it, at the abortion clinic, and that she's married to a Christian man and her parents don't like it, I thought, that's real life. I hate the fact that you've got compromise, but that's real life. That's a lot of people. They're living in moral and spiritual compromise. So yeah, if it had been just totally hokey and poorly acted and poorly put together, even with a powerful message, it's just like listening to good preaching with a bad sound system. It gets a little screechy and it's a little hard to hear. So I agree with you. It was well executed. It was well acted, and it was anointed by God. And what was portrayed wisely. It was enough to convey the reality of things without overdoing the blood and the gore, but enough that I believe many lives are going to be changed and many lives are going to be saved.
I agree. One of the things I thought was interesting about the movie was there's also a message of faith and redemption in the movie, which I think is very important to being a Christian. That if you miss that part of Christianity, it's like you miss really the whole point. That's why Christ did what he did. We call him the Redeemer, the Savior. That's because it's who he is. It's what he did. But what's interesting, George, is whenever I talk about this on the radio, inevitably
I'll get phone calls from listeners and viewers, and they will get on the phone with me and break down sobbing and weeping about an abortion they had 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Or it could be a man saying, I paid for my girlfriend's abortion. One of my friends, a white friend, was at a black showing of Unplanned. So he was probably the only white guy there. It was an all black congregation, and they did a preview screening of the movie. And my white friend said, Mike, it was great. It was like a church service. They're talking back to the screen, and they're, amen, and reacting and responding. When it was done, a man came over to him sobbing and said, how many decades ago I paid for an abortion? And he was so guilt-ridden that he finally found a release to get this out and to receive forgiveness and cleansing. Even a lot of Christians, at one point in their life, before they were saved or at a bad time in their lives as believers, they had an abortion. And on the one hand, they know they're forgiven, but this thing still hangs over their heads. They still feel as if I'll never really be right with God. And if God can forgive an Abby Johnson, God can forgive any of us. And yes, there's a wonderful message of grace, redemption, forgiveness. And my hope is that many who had abortions in the past and are sorry for today, that they'll find healing for their wounds as well.
Absolutely. I thought that was one. I mean, the movie was powerful from start to finish, but it had a number of powerful themes that I thought it really executed well. And it gave you a good contrast because you had some kind of what you might call almost angry, hateful pro-life protesters. And then you had some that were actually clearly devoted followers of Christ. And while they opposed abortion, they didn't oppose or hate the people that were involved with it. And that turned out to be very crucial to Abby's story and how she was able to, if you will, come to the light, see the light. The fact that there had been some people in her life that weren't hateful and calling her names, but instead were actually nice people.
One of my
showing
friends,
forth love.
Yeah, one of my friends years ago had the privilege of baptizing Norma McCovey, who is better known as the Roe in Roe v. Wade. Right. The whole thing was a sham. The whole thing was a deception. And later she came to faith. But this man is a strong pro-life leader, and he confronted her at every turn, but he always reached out every way he knew how, privately reached out in love. And then ultimately her heart was turned. So we're still dealing with fellow human beings, and all of us have to remember how much God forgave us. Maybe we didn't participate in abortions, but we've sinned in one way or another, and God had mercy on us. And we always need to say, yes, abortion is sin, abortion is wrong, it's ugly. The blood of the unborn is crying to God. America hangs in a very precarious culture of death, and a large reason for it is the sin of abortion. You wonder how God's even allowed us to stand this long with all the light we have, with all the evil we've done. At the same time, Jesus died to save sinners. Jesus came for the sick, not for the healthy. We need to proclaim hope and life, and then be holistically pro-life people, which the pro-life movement is. In other words, if you can't have that baby, we can work with you to see that baby adopted into a good home. If you want to have that baby, we want to stand with you and help, because we are pro-life people.
Absolutely. Our time's about up, but I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell our listeners how they can follow your work, read the things that you write about. How do they follow Dr. Brown?
Yeah, go to askdrbrown.org, askdrbrown.org. I write normally about 5 new articles a week. We have our daily broadcast 5 days a week. We do live stream on Facebook, YouTube, if it's not on your local radio station. And then we have thousands of hours of free resources, and we're super active on social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc. All that you can connect with at askdrbrown.org, askdrbrown.org.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Brown. We really appreciate it. I want to remind our listeners, you're listening to Conservative Commandos, and of course, we are broadcast all across this great nation on the Conservative Commandos radio network, and now on the AUN TV network in California, and I think soon in Nevada. And of course, if you're not near one of those broadcast towers, you can catch us everywhere on Al Gore's amazing internet. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show, with a shout out to our listeners in Jacksonville, Tampa, and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Nevada, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Boulder and Colorado Springs, Colorado, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Long Beach, California. We're everywhere. We are everywhere. This is Sharon Angle, and I'm here with my co-host, George Landreth, and we have a guest, George. His name is Brian McNichol, and he's the lead writer for the Accuracy in Media website. He has worked with the Heritage Foundation, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, the Galen Institute, and a variety of other policy organizations in Washington, and served as Director of Communications for the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Brian, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you. We asked you to come on and talk about an article you've written, ex-CIA chief poster child for pundits who got it wrong on Trump collusion. Talk to us a little bit about who this guy is and how he is helping them to just kind of keep this story going, even though most of us realize it's a hoax.
Yeah. You know, he has a friend in common with you. He was the head of the CIA, John Brennan. He was from New Jersey. He had college. He started studying Arabic languages. He ended up being a sort of a pro-Arab American, so to speak. You know, sometimes their interests over ours. He voted for Gus Hall for president, the Communist Party candidate one time. You know, but he somehow during the Obama administration got to be director of the CIA. When his time there ended, when President Trump took over, he went to the networks and has become a fierce critic of President Trump. And then he is at the center of how all the Muellergate stuff got started. He was shopping this dossier around to people such as Harry Reid and John McCain, who in turn distributed it to the press and to the FBI, and said, "Hey, you know, the intelligence people are telling me, you know, this is going on, and we're not investigating it." And you know, the FBI put some very anti-Trump people to work investigating it, and we ended up, you know, 2 years later, we're where we are today. The president's term has been hobbled by a fruitless, baseless, useless investigation.
So we're talking about a former CIA person who should have some credibility, who people, even if you're not Harry Reid and John McCain, you should have some respect for that position and think that these guys wouldn't tell you an out-and-out lie is, I mean, I can't hardly fault Harry Reid and John McCain for wanting to believe someone like that.
Right, and well, and it was anti-Trump, which both of them were eager to participate in. But the other thing is like he knew the provenance of this dossier. He knew that it was not properly sourced. He knew that they were, it was financed by the Clinton campaign. He knew that none of the accusations had been proven, but he's going around presenting it as the truth to create press attention, which then they could say, hey, the press is reporting this. We better look into it, right? And B, to get people in Congress alarmed about it, who may or may not have been acting in good faith, may or may not have been in on it all along, and then he goes into the media and he is, he's saying, when all this comes out, and like as if, I was in the CIA and I saw enough of these files to know that something is going to come out. It's sort of being a CIA person that sort of gives the story an imprimatur that it shouldn't have had. He had no idea what he was talking about.
Well,
as we now know.
Yeah, and it looks like here's a sentence from your article, but it wasn't just the false stories, but the sheer volume of the coverage, the sheer weight given to it. So the media is really complicit in this whole, I'm going to call it a crime. I think this is criminal. In fact, I want to get into that with you in the next question. So I want you to talk about, I guess we'll just go there right now, if you don't mind. I feel like someone needs to be held accountable. Are we going to hold Brennan accountable for lying? I mean, if we lie on the stand, it's perjury. We can go to jail. If what are the consequences here of a former CIA director lying and then the media supporting those lies?
Well, there's no law against lying to the press, but there is, there is some question about how they, what they chose to investigate and when and how, based on what, and whether his office was politicized by President Obama, that was, carrying out basically an opposition research, function for the Clinton for president campaign. If that could be found, I mean, that's the biggest political scandal in American history by far. And I don't know how far they are from nailing that down. There are some people out there who believe that case is pretty close to a symbol.
Well, I guess there's
the FISA warrants, right,
mm-hmm.
are involved, right? They got warrants on people to investigate them, and they had people go to them and try to lure people into saying criminal things, right? All based on information that they knew to be false. And if you get to the point where you can prove that in a court of law, yeah, he'll be in a lot of trouble, and a lot of other people will too.
I'm thinking back to my legislative days when we had people come before us to testify, and they were under oath, the same kind of oath that you take in court, and we could have them jailed for perjury if their testimony was proven false. So I'm thinking about him going with this false testimony to Harry Reid and to John McCain. Isn't there a crime there?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I'm not a lawyer, but, is it an official act to tell a senator something? I don't know. That probably would lead to prosecuting a lot of other stuff, too. But I think that, the FISA warrants, if you're misrepresenting your information to a judge in support of a warrant, that is definitely an identifiable, punishable crime. I think that's where this will end up.
And I think that the American people, at least those of us out here in the heartland of America, are ready to see someone punished for this, because it, as you said, it's just a completely politically driven hate crime against the president. And I wonder, does President Trump have standing, for slander or libel here? Because certainly there's that as well.
That's another interesting question. I think that President Trump, who obviously doesn't care about the money, would. I think what he wants to use this for is political ammo, and I think it'll be really good political ammo because it's hard to imagine now what they could say about him that people would believe. Right? Almost anything you accuse him of, it's going to be you can't be trusted. The media now, their trust by the American people is at an all-time low. Rachel Maddow lost a quarter of her audience, the night after the Mueller report came out. People said, I've been watching you tell me this for 2 years, and it's not true.
Well, it couldn't have happened to a nicer person.
And it's like, I wrote about this today. She's going nuts. Slate had a piece today. Total liberal, totally on her side. Slate was saying, hey, she's doubling down on a proven false conspiracy theory. Normal people don't do that.
We're talking here with Brian McNichol on Conservative Commandos radio show about an article he wrote, ex-CIA chief, poster child for pundits who got it wrong on Trump collusion. We're here with my co-host, George Landreth, and we'll be right back after these messages. We are coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM/FM 24/7. And now you can watch our TV show on the AUN TV network in Northern California. We'll be right back after this message.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth with Sharon Engel. We're your Conservative Commandos host today. We're glad you stuck with us because this is, in fact, the place the newsmakers go to be heard. And if you missed any portion of the show and you want to hear a rebroadcast of either the radio show or the television show, just check out our websites. You can do that at ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. We've been talking with Brian McNichol, and he is the lead writer for Accuracy in Media. He's also worked at the Heritage Foundation, Competitive Enterprise Institute, the Galen Institute, and a variety of other public policy, I would say conservative public policy organizations in Washington. He was also the director of communications for the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. So, Brian, we're glad to have you on the show. We appreciate you taking time out from your busy schedule to be with us.
Sure. So let me ask you this, George. How is Sophia doing? She's still playing basketball? I coached George's niece.
You're talking about my niece?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's doing great. The season's over, but she's doing great. It's a lot of fun to. We enjoyed watching her play. She's really just a very good athlete.
Yeah, she really.
Dynamite comes in small packages. She's not a a lot of times you think a basketball player is big. She's not really big, but she's got a lot of skills. So.
Yeah, she's really.
But anyhow,
too, so.
Let's jump in on the. In case our listeners are wondering, Brian and I know each other. We've known each other a long time. Dating back at least to his days at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. But, but anyhow, Brian, one of the things I find interesting about this story that you've put together in terms of studying what's happened in the media and how, someone like Brennan and others there's a certain act of deception. Some of it was like, on a cable network. And I think you're exactly right. I'm a lawyer, and I think it's difficult to prosecute someone for lying on air, as it were. But some of them lied to Congress while under oath and testifying. And then if some of them were involved in the FISA warrant, which likely they were as, head of CIA and other things, they had some involvement with that. If you've had any involvement in perpetrating a fraud in the court, you become personally liable for that. And that is just like lying under oath. It's a very serious crime. It's a felony. And in fact, if a judge finds out about it, he can actually punish you without a trial. He can just hold you in contempt. In other words, you don't have to be charged by a prosecutor. If I go before a judge and he finds that in the process of me presenting a case to him, I've purposefully lied, he doesn't have to have some policeman come arrest me, have a grand jury and so forth. He can just say, Mr. Landreth, you've perpetrated fraud on this court, and for that you are fined $5,000 and you get to spend the next month in my jail. Yeah. And if I want to try to appeal that, I can. But the bottom line is that's how serious a crime it is that the judge can punish you right then and there on his or her own. And one thing, I guess, is one of the damages that I see here, and this is what I want to ask you about specifically, is in your mind, what damage is done to our intelligence apparatus when we have people who use intelligence for partisan purposes to play partisan games, and then next time someone comes up and says, I have information about a problem that America should be addressing, and people kind of like roll their eyes and say, yeah, whatever. I mean, does that really pose a problem, or is the boy who cried wolf problem not real here?
I think that's a huge problem. Especially, I think it's more a problem for the FBI than the CIA, because the CIA is outward facing anyway. And, most of what it does, we don't know about or we disavow. And the people in the other parts of the world, they're going to trust us or not trust us based on what's happening at that moment. But the FBI is a permanent force. It's domestic law enforcement. It's, every time an investigation opens, in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I'm from, there, is that U.S. attorney doing the political bidding of a president, or a political party that, used the FBI for this. It could be called into question whatever you do because, we've proven that we will use it for political ends. Trump has actually depoliticized the use of the FBI. It's actually, been reduced a good bit and, sort of put back in its proper place because, a lot of the head of it has been sheared off by this scandal. That's why you always see that, the graphic of all the Trump people who've been, admitted to these crimes or whatever is part of the Mueller report. There's the other graphic of all the people at the DOJ and the FBI who have been fired or adjudicated against some way or another. And their crime is, abusing public power. It's a little different than Manafort avoiding taxes. Not that that's not, it's not bad to avoid taxes, but the other crime is using intelligence services and special powers given only to certain federal agencies against U.S. citizens, against people for purely political reasons, trying to reverse the outcome of a presidential election.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that I think is very interesting is before the Mueller report came out, Brennan basically, and this is pretty well established, his shtick was, well, I'm the former head of the CIA. I'm privy to information that most of you aren't, and I've seen stuff, and trust me, they got the goods on Trump. That was his
Right.
shtick.
That's right.
Now, and
Right.
then after, I thought it was very revealing that right after the Mueller report came out, he tweeted, "Oh, I must have been misinformed." And it's
Yeah.
like, no,
Well,
you
got
weren't
some bad
misinformed.
information.
You were lying. There's a difference. He made it sound
And
like
then
he
he
was the
said,
victim of misinformation, when in fact he was the victimizer.
yeah, he later said, he said that there was not as much there as I thought. So what did you think? How did you get that wrong? You were in the middle of it all. You can't be. In other words, I was mostly right, but I was enough wrong that he can get off. Right? But it's like, no, you were completely wrong, and you had to know you were wrong. And I think that's the why. I mean, he's the only one on that side who's really been contrite about it. Right? The rest of them are just sort of there. Oh, we're going to see the whole Mueller report, and we got to see every notation of the grand jury and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, whatever. He's the only one who said, "Hey, wait a minute, might have gone too far," which makes me wonder, what is it he, what is it he knows, right? What is about to happen? Does he now feel in jeopardy, legal jeopardy, in a way he didn't before that came out?
Right. Well, we know the FISA warrants are fraud was committed, that people actually lied under oath and filled out forms presenting evidence that they knew to be false, and excluding things, information selectively that the judge needed. And by the way, if our listeners are wondering, that's also a crime. If the judge looks at me and says, I say to him, well, I didn't lie to you, Judge. I just didn't tell you things I knew that you would have wanted to know, but I didn't want you to hear. He would say, same difference, dude. That's right. You put on your orange jumpsuit, you'll be spending a month in my jail. That's just how it works. I'm sorry. You may not like that if that's what but that's just, you cannot pull the wool over a judge's eyes and expect him to accept it and be happy about it. But our time's about up, so what I want to make sure I give you a chance to do, Brian, is tell us how folks can follow the work that you do and that Accuracy in the Media does, because you guys do good stuff.
We're at aim.org. It's a good website. There's stuff up there every day. My thing is at McNicholB and on Twitter, and look forward to hearing from people.
Excellent. Well, we really appreciate you being on the program with us. Some great stuff. Brian McNichol with Accuracy in the Media. I assume that you've concluded that they're mostly inaccurate, of course, but your point and your goal is to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they live up to their obligations in a free society where we hope that they'll be a watchdog. And
right.
Sadly, they haven't been much of one. They've been unreliable and dishonest, and when the other guy was in office, they were largely a lapdog. But we appreciate you keeping us up on all the facts. But we are up against the break. You're listening to Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth with Sharon Engel, and of course we are coming to you on the Conservative Commandos radio network, which is broadcast from one side of the nation to the other, and of course carried also on the AUN TV network. And if that's not enough, we are also on Al Gore's amazing internet. Don't go away. We will be right back.
Welcome back, listeners, to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show. I'm Sharon Angle here with my co-host, George Landreth, and we're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network with a shout-out here to our listeners in Jacksonville, Tampa, and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Nevada, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Boulder and Colorado Springs, Colorado, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Long Beach, California. We're everywhere. We are everywhere. And we have our next guest with us, George. His name is Alfredo Ortiz. He's the president and CEO of the Jobs Creator Network, where he has led the defense of small businesses from the onslaught of bad government policies. Alfredo has testified before legislative committees about the impact of taxation and regulation on small business growth and speaks frequently to business organizations across the nation about the need for job creators to seize responsibility for defending free enterprise. He has been widely published in major media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, CNBC, The Hill, and U.S. News and World Report, and is a frequent guest on cable news networks and national radio talk shows, including CNN, Fox News, Hugh Hewitt, Mike Gallagher, and The Dennis Prager Show. Alfredo, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show.
Sharon, thank you very much for having me. I would love the show and love the opportunity to speak to all of your listeners.
Well, it's our great pleasure and a real opportunity for us to talk to you about an article that you wrote, Understanding the Cuts This Tax Season. This is so timely, Alfredo. I'm looking forward to April 15th, I think. I don't know. Tax reform kind of hit me hard. I don't get to itemize anymore because I just haven't reached that minimum deduction anymore. So I think it's good that you're here to talk to us about just how the tax cuts and tax reform have affected us here in the heartland.
Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. And it's actually is. I think you'll be relieved when you finish up all your taxes come April 15th. We're finding is about 80% of all households are actually going to benefit from that. And a few reasons. There's three real reasons that are part of that outcome. Is that first of all, the tax rates overall were lowered. That's one of the big ones. There was also a higher standard deduction, so hopefully you'll see that will actually really help you. And then the last one really is expanded tax credits. So what we have found is that overall, the withholdings, when you compare 2018 versus 2017, for example, an average household is probably going to save about $3,000. So again, when you combine those three, the lower tax rates, the higher deduction, and expanded tax credits, it really was, I think, a very, very positive thing for the majority of Americans across the country.
Well, now there is a measure. It's called, there's a number of measures in the Tax Cuts and Job Act that contribute to this reduced tax burden. So talk to us a little bit about this because, we know about the tax cuts, and we've seen the impact. I know we're growing here in Nevada with jobs. So talk about how that's all worked together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things, that we really fought for at Job Creators Network was a specific emphasis on relief from those horrible high tax rates for small business owners, for example. And one of the reasons I think you're seeing that great growth is because small businesses are growing again. And 2/3 of new job growth is really in the hands of small business. I think, as probably many of your listeners know, it really is the backbone of our economy. And so when you look at actually the benefit of what happened to small businesses, they got not only lower tax rates, again, because it's what's called a pass-through business. So it basically goes through your personal income tax filing, so you have the lower tax rate benefit. But the big thing that's really helped is two different things. Is a 20% small business deduction, which has really been a tremendous boon for small businesses, because they're able to reinvest that right back into whether it's higher wages, increased benefits, more hiring, but also an immediate expensing of capital expense, which is huge. Normally, you'd have to deduct it over a certain amount of years. It could be 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, et cetera, depending on the piece of equipment. because of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, you have immediate expensing, and so many of our members, and just across the board anecdotally, what we're hearing is people are taking advantage, small business owners are taking advantage of that and investing hard dollars into assets in their businesses so that they can continue to grow and really expand on their American dream.
Well, you give one of these anecdotal examples here in your article, and actually it's not much of an anecdote, I guess, because this fellow testified in front of Congress, so that kind of makes it real, doesn't it? His name's Guy.
Oh, it was very real. Yeah, it was very real, and Guy's just fantastic, and his story, I mean, it's just unbelievable. If you go onto our website of taxcutswork.com, we actually have captured his story in a video. This is a gentleman who, probably mortgaged his house. I think it was like 6 or 7 different times. And again, I got to take a step back. This is what I love about my job, is I get to work with these amazing small business owners across the country that have these stories of just perseverance, of just not giving up, of believing in their dreams, believing in their vision. And Guy's one of them. I mean, it's unbelievable what he was able to do, and the benefits that came to him because of the tax that was able to allow him to hire about 29 new employees. He distributed larger bonuses, he expanded his production, and he built a brand new facility. I mean, this is truly one of, it's one of those stories that you wrap a ribbon around it and go, this America is why this Tax Cut and Jobs Act happened, and why our economy now is booming, and is quite frankly the envy of the world.
Well, it certainly has helped Nevada. Right after Obama took office here, he pretty much killed our economy. We're a tourist economy, and he said anybody that's going to Las Vegas for a convention is going on a junket, and he killed 500 conventions immediately. It just went away.
I remember that.
Business went away. And
yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah, it's been a real hard slog coming back from that. But here now we have jobs that are going begging. In fact, people say, you got to raise the minimum wage. Well, nobody's working for minimum wage in Nevada right now, not even at fast food places. They're having to raise their wages just to attract people that will come in and work for them. And there's always a better paying job just around the corner for people that we would probably classify as unskilled labor because they didn't go to college and they don't really have any further or education than their high school diploma. But because there are so many jobs, the employers are willing to train right there on the job. So we're really experiencing an incredible boom in the job market right here.
Yeah, it's amazing, Sharon, when you look across the country, these stories are being repeated from city to city, state to state, really across the country. I mean, when you look at the broader impact that tax cuts in a positive way had on our economy, especially when it comes to job creation, wage increases, and unemployment, it's been unbelievable. I mean, when you look at it by every single demographic group, unemployment is at record lows right now. Wage increases are some of the healthiest wage increases that we've seen month over month in a tremendously long time. In fact, under Obama, we actually had wage deflation, which is horrible. And now we're actually seeing wonderful wage increases for small business owners. I actually jokingly, whenever I'm talking with some of my my Democrat friends there on the left, I'll tell them that I think Donald Trump has actually done more for that Fight for 15 movement than the Fight for 15 movement has done itself. I mean, we are seeing record wage increases, and we couldn't be more excited because you know what? Hardworking Americans, we always believe, should be making more money, and they are, but they're doing it. It's happening the right way, right? It's the laws really of how an economy works are what is creating that kind of growth, because there are more jobs now available than the people to fill them. I think we got about 7 million jobs, about 6 million jobs out there that are unfilled, and only about 5 million people to fill them. So it's a fantastic time, quite frankly, to be looking for a job because the availability is there and the wages are just really, really strong.
Well, as you know, we have quite a strong warehousing community here in the Reno area, and one little girl that I know, and I say she's a little girl. She's a young mother that went from one warehousing job that paid $20 an hour to another that paid $22 an hour with better benefits. So they're really being able to shop around, and it isn't, as you said, the minimum wage group that has driven this. It is actually the free market, and what we embrace is really free market economics that drives the wage market. So we're really excited about what you do in Washington to promote just that. Just let us be free. We're coming to you.
Well, I know, and yeah, and Sharon, I mean, going back to, unfortunately, the Obama years, we don't ever want to go back to those years, honestly, because when you look at actually what happened during that administration, there was actually a period, and this was very scary, the first time in history that this happened, that we had basically what I call negative entrepreneurialism. It's a little term I kind of coined here, because more businesses were closing than were opening. That was the first time in history, and that's because people were just giving up. The taxes were too high, the red tape was too high, and because of Dodd-Frank, community banks were closing up. I'm sure in Reno you saw that happen all too many times, these community banks closing. Small business owners couldn't get their loans anymore.
That's
it was
right.
horrible.
That's right. Well, I know that George wants to talk to you on the other side of this break about more of the good news that we have. We are coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM FM 24/7. And now you can watch our TV show on AUN TV Network in Northern California. We'll be right back with our guest, Alfredo Ortiz, talking about jobs with yours truly, Sharon Angle, and my co-host, George Landreth.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth with Karen Engel. We, of course, are grateful to be your Conservative Commando host today. It's always a pleasure to be here because this is the place to be, and it is the place the newsmakers go to be heard. We have been talking with, we have a great newsmaker. We have Alfredo Ortiz, and I will briefly reintroduce him. But before I do that, I do want to remind you, if you want to hear a rebroadcast of the show or watch a rebroadcast of the television show, check out our websites, ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. Now, as I said, Sharon and I have been talking with Alfredo Ortiz. He's the president and CEO of the Job Creators Network. And in that, you might imagine that he actually works to defend small business and entrepreneurs from bad government policy, heavy taxes, regulatory regimes that are stifling, etc. And he spends a lot of his time trying to get this message out. So you've probably read his stuff in some of the major papers and magazines and websites all across our country. And you've heard him and perhaps seen him on television and radio as well, besides here at Conservative Commandos. So anyhow, Alfredo, thanks so much for sticking through the break with us. We're grateful to have you. I thought maybe
Thank you, George. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I thought I might start off by, instead of pretending or instead of me being one of the Conservative Commandos, I thought maybe I'd try, if I could, to channel someone like, I don't know, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez or something like that, just for a moment, and have you respond to the utter silliness.
You're already making me laugh, George. Stop it.
Okay, I'll try not to make you laugh too much or cry. Maybe it's one or the other. But so, you're somebody who's concerned about job creators, but she would accuse you of being somebody who's selfish, who's only interested in making money. You don't care about little people and so forth. And I guess my question is, how would you respond to that kind of lunacy?
George, first of all, yes. I don't know whether to laugh or cry whenever I hear her talk, because some of the stuff that comes out of AOC is just unbelievable. We call her AOC, by the way. That's the kind of the term that most people now know her by. When you look at what happened, for example, in New York, and we put a billboard up in Times Square, which got a lot of attention. We called out the lunacy on the Amazon deal, for example. Here you had a governor and a mayor and, quite frankly, the district representative that worked very, very hard to pull Amazon to New York, who won the bid, 25,000 to 40,000 great-paying jobs. I think it was like about $150,000 jobs. So these are really great-paying jobs, about $4 billion in annual wages. And she determined that that was not good for Long Island City and the people of New York. And so, quite frankly, she worked at getting them to basically renege on this idea. Not even renege, but just pull out, because they were saying, boy, this is the honeymoon phase. What is it going to be like when it's, when we're really into this thing? And so Amazon pulled out, and one thing that we wanted to point out was that downstream effect. Not only was those jobs of $4 to $6 billion in lost wages, we calculated it could have been $12 to $15 billion of lost economic activity on an annual basis, because, for every one of those Amazon jobs in New York, you need about 3, 4, 5 jobs even potentially could have been created, because it serves that headquarters. Think about all those downstream jobs and businesses, the dry cleaner, the deli, the deli guy, the shoe shine guys. I mean, you name it, right? I mean, all those folks who had to service the headquarters. Think about all the union jobs, hundreds of union jobs just to build the actual headquarters itself. That all went to waste. But she determined that, nope, this is not a good idea, simply because she had true economic illiteracy on her hands here, that she couldn't understand how $30 billion of tax revenue incoming at a cost, let's say, of $3 billion, netting 27 to the state, was actually a good thing for the folks of New York, not to mention the jobs. And, the list goes on, quite frankly, George. I mean,
also, if you're making $150,000 a year, you are also, if you're making $150,000 a year, you are also paying a lot of taxes. So it's not just Amazon that pays taxes; it's those taxpayers also. And they said goodbye to all of that.
Oh, it's all of this, but it's just, she was on on another interview where she was saying, hey, I'm 29 years old and, about to turn 30, and, but I really kind of know best. I'm the boss. I introduced the Green New Deal. You get to the point where you just have to kind of shake your head and go, I just don't understand how she continues to be, this force in the Democrat Party. But I have to tell you, she is basically forcing that Democrat Party further and further to the left every day. As conservatives, we should actually probably be happy, because, quite frankly, it's going to get to the point where it's so ridiculous, so crazy, that it's just going to be a logical choice to vote conservative in 2020, because we believe in the liberties and freedoms, the stuff that she's promoting, the socialist ideas that she promotes. We're seeing these unfold every single day right now before our very eyes in Venezuela. This is what happens when government officials like her, right, promise too many things, too many free goods, too many free services to people with no real way of paying it. And, this is exactly what's happening. I mean, think about Venezuela. Within this decade, it went from being one of the richest countries in the world to probably literally one of the poorest right now. And all the stuff that's going on out there. Why would anybody be promoting that? It's unbelievable.
Right. It's misery and suffering, and people don't understand that. One of the things I think is kind of interesting about AOC is she kind of confidently and with this air of, I know exactly what I'm talking about, tone to her voice, says some of the most outlandishly silly and foolish things I think I've ever heard. The truth is, Barack Obama used to do the same thing. And I don't understand why it is people put up with this.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, when you look at these ideas like the Green New Deal, $93 trillion price tag, and I got to, make sure that all of your listeners understand, not one single senator, not even the sponsor of the deal himself in the Senate, Senator Markey, even voted for the actual Green New Deal. All he did was vote president. In fact, every single senator either voted on the Democrat side, voted either president, and 3 or 4 of them, I believe, voted no. I mean, this is how crazy it is. Pelosi's not even going to take it up as an idea, which, by the way, George, I want to make sure that everybody tracks this and watches for this, because this is what the Democrats do really well. They'll take some massive idea like this, and then they pull it back and they try to break it up in little pieces, because they don't think the American public is going to realize that it's basically the same thing. And so we're going to continue at Job Creators Network to call this out because we want to make sure people understand that the Green New Deal, and we call it the Green Raw Deal, by the way, broken up in multiple little pieces, or Medicare for All, and we call it Mediscare for All, it's going to be broken up in these tiny little pieces. They're going to put different names on it, and they're going to hope that they can pass all these small little bills and get it past the American public. At Job Creators Network, we are not going to let that happen. We're going to continue to call it out, whether it's on a billboard, whether it's social media, whether it's on TV, whether it's print. But we want to make sure that the American public understands how this socialist movement can bring down our country, and it is the last thing that we ever want to see happen. So we're going to continue to defend capitalism and freedom and liberty till we win.
Excellent. Well, one of the things I've noticed, and this is certainly my view of how this works, is the reason why they voted present instead of for or against the bill is because they actually agree with the bill. But what they're upset with her about is it's kind of like, shh, this was our little secret. We were going to try to do this stealthily and at a step at a time. We weren't going to blow it all up at once, you idiot. And so they're upset with her for kind of outing them. I would argue that she's actually not more extreme than them. She believes what they believe. The difference is she wants to do it all right now, and they understand that we're not interested in that. And so they're prepared to lie to us. And she's a true believer, so she doesn't want to lie to us. She just wants to do it now. But at least that's my take. But we are up against the clock.
Actually,
so,
I don't. Yeah, I was going to say I think you're right on that, George. I really do.
Okay, good. Well, we're up against the clock, so I just want to give you a quick opportunity to tell our listeners how they can follow your work, how they can keep up with the Job Creators Network, etc.
Well, thank you very much. Again, we're a national pro small business advocacy, advocating 30 million small business owners and really their economic interests. You can find more information at jobcreatorsnetwork.com. That's jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Please go on there. We urge you. We need your help. There are millions of small businesses out there that need advocacy work. We are happy and proud to be doing the work that we're doing, and we will continue to defend free enterprise and capitalism again until we actually win this fight against socialism.
Excellent. Well, you're listening to Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth, and she is Sharon Engel, and we are coming on the Conservative Commandos radio network, broadcast all across this great nation, and on the AUN TV network, and also on Al Gore's amazing internet. Don't go away. We will be right back.
Welcome back, listeners. Well, it's the end of our show, George, and it's time.
Always fun. The time flies way too fast.
It does. It's time to thank our guests, and I really do want to thank Dr. Michael Brown for being here, Brian McNichol, and of course, Alfredo Ortiz. They just made wonderful guests today for us this afternoon. So, George, tell our listeners how they can find you and follow you.
Well, Frontiers of Freedom is just ff.org. Pretty simple, 2 letters, ff.org. You can find me, like say Twitter and so forth, just George Landreth, at George Landreth, Landrith.
That's great. I do encourage you to follow George. You can also find me at SharonEngel.com. But for right now, we got to run. We got to go. We'll see you next. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow on the TV and radio.